Antimage and Isekai Lituk Adventure, Ends of Magic Book 1, audiobook by Kevin Chapter 1 A Long Trip, and Athen twisted the key to his apartment and felt the heavy bolt clunk back. He took 3 steps into the darkened single-room studio, swinging the door closed and shucking his backpack into the center of the bright carpet that took up most of the open floor space. Then, he flopped into the overstuffed armchair that was the largest piece of furniture in the place, aside from the bed. It had been a nightmare getting the chair up the stairs and into the apartment, but Nathan's friends had earned their pizza for helping him move out of the graduate student dorms a few years ago. Besides, he'd found the comfortable chair marked up for grabs on the street. On a graduate student stipend, it was hard to turn down comfortable furniture for the low price of free. Sighing, Nathan twisted in the chair to fish his phone from underneath his wallet and keys, pulling up the meditation app. He'd started doing mindfulness meditation almost a year ago to help deal with the anxiety of graduate school. To his surprise, it had helped. "I'm definitely better about not just sitting in this chair and feeling bad about everything I should be doing. Instead, I can meditate and feel productive about not doing anything." Nathan started the session, listening to the soothing voice through his earbuds as he relaxed deeper into the cushions. He let his mind go still, silencing his inner voice and focusing on the sensations of breathing, of gravity pulling his body into the chair. Time passed, and Nathan didn't focus on anything. He didn't make plans, and he especially didn't worry about the fellowship application due soon, or tomorrow's experiment that would cap off the last 2 months of work. If that experiment worked, it would be a big step forward towards his doctorate. If it didn't, well, it depended on how it didn't work. Nathan realized he was spiraling, and with a moment of attention, the worries dissipated like smoke. Some more time passed, and another thought intruded on Nathan's mind. Akinar Avi Nukal Ad Kxrako, Dilan Avail Zalark de D Hack. He was confused. The words had emerged clearly in his consciousness in a deep, booming voice, but he didn't understand where they'd come from or the language itself. They hadn't come from the earbuds. The words had seemed to inject themselves directly into his brain. He was about to stop meditating early and start making dinner when it happened again, the words more forceful this time. They pressed against the inside of his head, grinding and overwhelming. Akinar Avi, Dono de no jailrove Udlak Dho Zok. Akinar Avi. Nathan's eyes snapped open and he tore off his earbuds, exhaling with frustration. "I don't need this now. Can't it wait until after the cytometry experiment? Just gimme a 24-hour rain check." He started to stand, but the voice crashed into his skull for a third time. It wiped out all thought. Dono de no. Nathan didn't feel the chair under him anymore, or the clothes on his skin. His eyes were open and saw nothing but black. Air tore itself from his open mouth, and his ears spiked in pain. This must be what being in vacuum feels like. Why aren't there any stars? Nathan flailed, accomplishing nothing but feeling the vacuum pulling on his lungs and eyes and the spit in his mouth boiling away. He tumbled in absolute darkness, with no reference point and no sense of anything other than himself. After what must have been mere seconds but felt much longer, he tumbled into brightness, landing on his butt on smooth stone. With vision tunneling, he heaved deep breaths, paying attention to nothing but pumping air in and out of his abused lungs. After a minute of slowing breaths, he looked around the room. Why am I naked? He was sitting in a shallow bowl of cold stone in the center of a large room. The entire place was made of the same smooth, pale stone that was under his butt, all lit evenly by a grid of bright lights in the ceiling. It looked like a clean room done in tan marble. The bowl was only a foot deep and several feet wide, so he could see out easily. The room around him was decorated with several pedestals capped with orbs shining in muted purples, yellows, and blues. They were linked together by a complex grid of glowing metal that looked like multiple overlapping circuit boards. The metal dimmed in color before his eyes, losing some of its blinding radiance. The formation wasn't centered on Nathan, but rather right behind him. He scooted around, sitting on his hands to protect his butt from the cold stone. There was a metal filigree arch supporting a horizontal disc of exquisitely carved stone 8 feet across. Multicolored lights emanated from a series of enormous gemstones inlaid into the arch and the stone. Over the disc hovered a horizontal portal into darkness. The portal rapidly shrank until it vanished with a tiny pop. Nathan stared blankly at the disc, losing himself in the fractal-like carvings for a moment. Whatever that is, it's beautiful. It's like an arcane language or art, all carved with mathematical precision. Magic. Nathan's attention was drawn by something moving beyond the arch. There was a man on a low dais at the edge of the room, and it looked like he was concluding a victory dance. The man pumped his fists and bounced on his feet like somebody who had just won the lottery, his orange robe flapping. Just behind him were a pair of humanoid statues with eerie levels of detail, flanking the door out of the room. The orange-robed man saw Nathan looking at him and held out his palm, the semi-universal gesture for stop, as he mouthed a word that didn't look like stop at all. He busied himself at a wide control panel, complete with flashing lights. The grid of equipment surrounding Nathan dimmed even faster, quickly turning into a mix of shiny metal and steel, copper and gold tones. The shining orbs lost their glow, many of them cracking apart with a faint tinkling sound that sounded expensive. The man hopped down from the dais, nearly skipping over to Nathan's bowl. He kept his attention fixed on Nathan, not sparing a second glance at the complicated apparatus that he threaded his bulk through with a deftness born of familiarity. Nathan found the man's single-minded focus unnerving and looked around for anything to cover himself with. He settled for simply putting a hand in front of his genitals before looking up to observe the man who was approaching Nathan's bowl. He looked to be a man of average height in late middle age, fairly pudgy, with a full head of black hair and a wide, stubbly face. His eyes glowed orange, and his face was full of excitement as he stopped in front of Nathan. He clapped his hands together and spoke in a low, fast voice. Dihak ak ka odadark. It sounded like the same deep voice Nathan had heard in his head earlier, and Nathan looked up at him dumbly and spoke with a raw throat. "Excuse me, sorry, but what?" The man slapped one hand across each eye in a gesture of self-admonishment, before stepping forward and laying a hand on Nathan's forehead. Ankiko Rurkyuko orange light emitted from the man's mouth with the words, and from the hand on Nathan's forehead. Nathan's head spiked in pain, a pressure and tightness squeezing down behind both temples like a concussion combined with the worst migraine Nathan had ever had. His eyes slammed shut and Nathan collapsed sideways. Both hands flew to his head, modesty forgotten. After a brief moment, he heard the man's voice again, and Nathan felt the language was more familiar than before. Cold and unyielding hands slid underneath him, lifting Nathan gently off the floor as he tried to curl into a ball around the pain in his head. Whatever held him felt more like a statue than a person. Nathan felt its steps carry him across the room, down a staircase and through a hallway. The pain in his head receded rapidly, and he blinked, teary eyes open. He was being carried by a humanoid statue made of the same sand-colored marble as the walls. A multicolored opalescence shone from its eyes. Then, a blue box flashed in Nathan's vision, front and center. "Welcome to Davrar. Davrar will help you survive, adapting you to the local biosystem. Davrar is calibrating to your understanding and determining your capabilities. Please be patient. This will not take long." What? Nathan desperately wanted to figure out what any of that meant, but the box vanished as soon as he parsed what it said. The man in orange hovered next to him, and when he saw Nathan open his eyes, he heaved a relieved sigh and started to talk quickly. "Hail the giant, you must be so confused. Be patient for just a moment and all will be explained." Each word caused another pulse of pain, but they were just faint wisps compared to the earlier migraine. Hang on, that wasn't English or Spanish. And neither was the text in the box. How did I understand that? Was that magic? I'm being carried by a statue. The man had distinctly spoken in the same language as before, but this time Nathan understood all the words and the grammar. His head was sore, his breathing uncertain, and too many questions and observations swirled in his mind. So he let the statue carry him down another flight of stairs and to a metal door. Beyond the door was a small stone room in the same seamless pale marble, complete with a bed, table, and 2 chairs in light wood. In one corner of the room, a trough of water smoothly ran underneath a hollowed-out seat. The statue, or golem, animated object, gently set Nathan down in one of the chairs on one side of the table. The orange-robed man smoothly slid into the seat across the table, and his orange eyes focused on Nathan's face like 2 searchlights. Given that they were faintly glowing, it wasn't too bad of a comparison. I will explain. I am Grand Dimension Archmage TLDHO Droxal, 7th Finger and 3rd Researcher of the Ascendant Academy of Giants Rest. I have summoned you here in a grand quest for insights and power. I scried across dimensions to find. He was interrupted by Nathan loudly coughing into his elbow, his lungs scraped raw. TL's eyes widened briefly, and he took in Nathan's teary eyes and naked body. Oh, a gauntlet of apologies. You have had a long journey. His lips curved into a self-satisfied smile. A very long journey. TL sized up Nathan, then gestured to the golem. Fetch an extra-large apprentice robe, a bowl of porridge, and 1 spoon. The mobile statue immediately turned and left the room, closing the door gently behind it. TL leaned across the table, catching Nathan's left hand in his right, even as Nathan flinched away. He spoke again in that resonant voice that Nathan had heard before TL had taught him a language with a touch. Moderate curring. Nathan's residual headache lessened dramatically, his breathing evened out and the ringing in his ears reduced to background noise. He shook his head out, amazed at how good he felt all of a sudden. As if by magic, actually by magic. He used magic on me and called himself an archmage. There's magic here and I can probably learn it. Excitement quickly replaced the pain. Nathan knew he should probably be scared. He should probably ask what the hell had just happened to bring him here. But instead, his mouth spoke the words at the forefront of his mind. Can I learn magic? TL smiled again, teeth white and eyes glittering. Yes, my boy, you will give me the secrets of your world and I will teach you magic. Together, we will grasp Davrar and bring it to our breast. Chapter 2 New Systems. And Athen shared a grin with TL, excitement flooding through him. He'd wanted to do magic ever since he was little, when his parents had read fantasy stories to him in bed. The wish had only grown stronger as he grew older and started reading on his own. Every birthday when he blew out the candles, his wish had been the same. I wish I could do magic. Then nothing fantastic had ever happened to him. No magic had appeared. So Nathan had turned to the closest thing available, science. If you couldn't discover arcane secrets and bend reality around you with magic spells, then at least you could discover secrets of the natural world and bend reality with normal tools. That motivation had gotten harder to rely on over the years. It could be hard to convince yourself that understanding the signaling pathways of stem cell differentiation was plumbing the deep secrets of reality, especially if your last few experiments failed to even let you know if you were on the right track. But none of that matters now. Wherever I am, magic is real and I can learn it. TL leaned back in his chair, adjusting his bulk and steepling his fingers. I am glad you are a willing helper in this. It is easier than if you were unwilling and presents fewer knots to slice. But here, food and clothes have arrived. I will allow you some time to dress and eat. Soon I shall return to discuss what you will tell me. As he spoke, the door opened and the golem of pale stone walked through, holding a steaming bowl. It placed the bowl in front of Nathan, then put a spoon next to it and laid a folded robe of gray cloth and a pair of slippers on the bed. Tial pushed himself up from the table and followed the golem out of the door. There came the thud of a bar being placed across the door. Should I be concerned about that? Hard to know. Nathan sat in the chair for a moment, too many thoughts crowding his mind. His excitement warred with his worry and anxiety about everything that had just happened. What are my priorities? Clothes first, I'm cold. He picked up the robe and put it on with only a bit of fumbling. It consisted of a t-shirt-like undershirt that fell past Nathan's hips. Draped over and attached to that garment was an enveloping robe that touched the floor, flowing around Nathan's legs like a bathrobe. There was a separate pair of underwear, like thick boxers with a drawstring. All of the material was soft and warm against his bare skin. Had his body changed at all? Nothing obvious. Pale, tall, a little bit more fat than he'd prefer. He eyed a lock of lanky blonde hair. Wish I'd gotten that cut last week. Hard to plan for Portal shenanigans. He put on the slippers and looked at the bowl. He'd been about to eat back on Earth, but food was at the bottom of his list after the events of the last half hour. Nathan had no idea. It's possible to eat and think. You don't want to be distracted by hunger when it's time to learn magic, or learn more about what's going on here. Nathan sat and started to mechanically eat. It was bland, but that was okay. He was excited about magic, obviously, but he couldn't let that overwhelm everything else, and he was being overwhelmed. Nathan took a minute to just sit, close his eyes and breathe, clearing his mind for a moment so he could focus on one thing at a time. What had happened and what did it mean? Tial had summoned him here intentionally. What had he said? He wanted knowledge, science, and technology. But where was here? Another reality, a parallel dimension or universe. Another world in the same universe as Earth, but far away and magical. It probably didn't matter, likely the only way to get back would be magic, the same way he'd arrived. Something to think about. I'm not raring to go back immediately. There's magic here. Magic was an opportunity he'd only dreamed of. Nathan didn't have people waiting for him that trumped that. He definitely didn't want to see his ex-girlfriend again. His parents were distant and divorced, and he'd drifted apart from most of his friends over the last few years of intensive research. Nathan wondered if his labmates would notice. He had stopped coming into work before his few friends noticed. He hadn't scheduled their next D&D session. I don't want to forget about the idea of going home, but I definitely want to learn more about this place. Is the world called Davrar? That's how the box thing identified it, and Tial said it too. Why were the people here humans? Tial certainly looked human. That suggested either a parallel universe or something else going on. Magic or something that made everybody look like what he expected to put him at ease. Nathan had read a sci-fi short story like that. Don't jump to conclusions. What do you know? Nathan grimaced. Tial had mental magic, didn't he? That spell had taught Nathan a language. If you could add something to a brain, you could probably take something away. Would Tial use mental magic on somebody without their consent? He kind of already had, and hadn't made a good first impression on Nathan. Tial reminded Nathan of some really arrogant professors he'd met, the ones who thought their positions and authority made them unquestionable beacons of knowledge, and God help the poor grad student who disagreed with their ideas. He also implied that if I didn't cooperate, it would just make things harder. More knots to slice. I don't like that phrasing at all. Nathan finished the porridge. He looked down at the empty bowl and the metal spoon he was holding. With a flash of inspiration, he looked around the room for somewhere inconspicuous. The corner of the room with a trough of water running underneath a chair looked best. On closer inspection, the chair was almost exactly like a toilet seat, with waste intended to fall into the shallow trough of running water. It also seemed intended as a source of drinking water. There was an empty stone cup next to the seat. Mixing sewage and drinking water was a terrible idea, but maybe they relied on the water to sweep away everything. Maybe cleaning or healing magic makes that a non-issue. I wouldn't want to tempt fate with that. I bet bacteria can evolve magic resistance. They can figure out how to resist just about everything else after all. Regardless, it was the perfect spot for Nathan's plan. An inconspicuous part of the room that he would often return to, even if someone messed with his mind. Using the base of the metal spoon he'd used to eat, Nathan scratched a symbol into the stone wall next to the toilet. It was something he was confident he'd recognize as coming from himself. Nobody else here should know the chemical structure of caffeine. Then, after another moment of thought, he added a single tick mark next to it. Okay, maybe if he got mind wiped, this would help him realize what had happened. What was next? That weird blue box. As if summoned by the thought, a larger blue box popped up. Davrar has recognized you, Nathan Lark. You have become fully integrated into Davrar and are ready to begin. As you have no talents, classes, or skills despite being of mature age, Davrar has deemed you to be at a disadvantage. Therefore, Davrar will provide more explanations than usual. Your class, talent, and skill gain will be accelerated until you are no longer at a disadvantage. Davrar is here to help you survive and prosper. It will offer you talents and utility skills according to your innate talents and abilities, and allow you to choose a class to suit your needs. Talents and utility skills can develop every 10 ranks but require insight to do so. Each class will grant different and unique class skills according to the theme of the class. To unlock classes, reach level 9 and choose from the presented list. Classes develop at levels 27, 81, 243, and so on. There are ways to acquire more than one class. Good luck discovering them. To level up, overcome challenges. The more dire the challenge, the more you will be rewarded. Davrar hopes you will survive and prosper. Nathan read through the box to be certain, but he knew what it said as soon as it appeared, as if he'd always known and was just now remembering the information. He felt anxiety build in the pit of his stomach as the strangeness of this place mounted. The box knew his full name and more information had been inserted into his head. Those weren't even his biggest concerns. The contents of the box imply that my survival is in question. Davrar, the world, and the origin of the boxes seemed to be offering him an RPG-like progression system. And how was it appearing to him? More mental magic. Nathan turned his head and the box turned with him. He wished it would move to the corner of his vision, and it did. It's definitely integrated with my thoughts somehow. Don't like not knowing anything about that. He closed the box with another thought and tried to open it up again. It took a second, only opening when Nathan prompted it with the first sentence of the box. I gotta figure out what's going on with these things. Toss it on the pile of stuff to figure out with everything else. Honestly, it seemed like something he should just ask Tial about. Was there any reason to hide it from the mage? Maybe Nathan should ask about it circumspectly. Nathan was mulling it over when another box opened up. Status of Nathan Lark Talent 1, Pending Talent 2, None Talent 3, None Class, None, Level 1 Utility Skills, None. That was pretty bare bones. The pending talent was listed underneath the status. Pending Talent. High-tier magic resistance. Your body has no magic inside it, and magic-resistant alchemical ingredients permeate your bones and brain, making you difficult to affect with magic. This talent will turn a temporary quirk into a personal talent. You will be able to resist and interfere with spells, and will have great difficulty casting magic of your own. Less effect on higher-tier spells. Magical items will have less effect on you, and weaker magical items degrade when in prolonged contact with you. Again, Nathan didn't have to read the description to understand what it said. Wait, magic-resistant alchemical ingredients. Earth had no magic, which was probably why he didn't either, but magic-resistant alchemical ingredients didn't sound good. Maybe they were something common on Earth that wasn't common here, and high-tier magic resistance. He read the description again with the eye of an RPG player. It sounded good, but it depended on how common magic was. The talent would do better resisting minor spells than big ones, which was where you would need it most. And it prevented both beneficial spells and personal magic, which made it a big no-no for Nathan. Maybe this was the basic talent and he could make it better, to the point of not preventing his own magic. Being immune to his own magic would probably let him do all sorts of risky magical experiments, but the name suggested it was already a high-tier talent. The lower-tier versions must be awful. Nathan could feel the talent waiting for his approval and almost declined it on the spot. He wanted to learn magic, and taking the talent would make that impossible. But it didn't seem like there was time pressure, so he held off on making the decision. With another thought, all of the boxes vanished again. What now? Well, I'm locked in a cell. It's not the worst cell, but it's still a windowless box with a door barred from the outside. Nathan's anxiety ratcheted up as he realized how little control he had of his situation. He was being held in captivity by a man who didn't strike him as entirely trustworthy. But Nathan was not as anxious as he probably should be. Either I'm just really excited about learning magic, or... Nathan slapped himself in the forehead and started checking his memories, seeing if he could notice anything weird about his thoughts of the last hour. You know, beyond the boxes, and magic, and being sucked through a portal to somewhere else. Then he searched the rest of the room for other messages he might have left himself. There was nothing, just smooth stone that looked like it had melted and cooled in the shape of a room. The bed was somewhat crudely carved, and the mattress felt like it was stuffed with grass. At least I don't have to worry about that fellowship application, or my experiments, though my experiment is totally shot unless this is all a really convincing dream. But that's okay. I can learn magic. Then if I go home, I'll demonstrate magic and become a celebrity. Maybe get shuffled off to a black site. But hey, then I get to confuse government agents, build up a rapport with the scientists studying me, and save the world or something. It would be a welcome change from the daily grind. None of that seemed likely, but it felt good to think about. Maybe that's why he wasn't feeling very anxious. His standard day-to-day worries of the last few months were gone. No more worrying about research, funding, lab politics, or budgeting to cover the rent on an expensive studio apartment he'd originally planned on splitting with his ex. And while there were definitely new things to worry about, they were exciting things to worry about. The sort of things that came with the territory of hopping between worlds and learning magic was real. And even if he didn't trust Tial, he could learn it by himself. Chapter 3. The first discussion in Athen didn't have too long to wait before Tial Dho Droxal, Grand Dimension Archmage of Giant's Rest, came back. He heard the door being unbarred, heralding Tial waddling in and sliding into the other chair. He wore a new robe, still in orange. It was embroidered with gold thread in patterns that could have been magical, but were certainly decorative. A man-sized stone statue in the same khaki marble as the walls followed the Archmage in, bearing a wooden slab covered in food. The golem set the food down in the middle of the table and withdrew to stand in front of the door. Tial shook his robes back from his hands and dug in, slapping preserved meats onto soft cheeses and dipping them in fragrant sauces. He smacked his lips appreciatively and gestured for Nathan to follow suit. As Nathan tentatively nibbled on the luxurious fare, Tial began lecturing, continuing to eat as he spoke. When I peered upon your world with my dimensional magics, I beheld marvels made common. Buildings taller than the clouds, metal traveling devices that flew faster than any bird, ships the size of islands, a wonder of wonders, all without magic. I could not halt myself from imagining what could be done by clasping such knowledge in the same hand as one holding magic. Tial took a bite from a log of cheese, pointing it at Nathan. I tailored my spell to summon one with expertise in your science. I built my spell to bring me one with the insights necessary to build such wonders. So I know that you know of such things. First, and most importantly, what is your class? He looked at Nathan expectantly and gestured with what resembled a pickled chicken leg to answer his question. There's a lot to digest there. I know a lot about science and technology, but I don't think I can build an airplane for Teal. But let's not rock the boat. I'm sorry, but classes. I don't think those exist where I come from. Teal's jaw dropped, giving Nathan an unfortunate view of the masticated cheese log. He sprayed some of it across the platter as he spoke. Hear me, but you cannot be serious. He gazed in wonder at Nathan. But you are. No classes and still your world achieves such things. He shook his head with amazement. I expect a vein of gold and find it to be of orichalcum. No matter, surely you've received some kind of message from Davrar about classes. All people do as soon as they can understand. Just think about your abilities, and Davrar should grant you information in some way that makes sense to you. You have seen such a thing, haven't you? Nathan tentatively nodded, and Teal grinned widely. Excellent. We shall begin by making you my personal apprentice. I will start with initial training in basic mana shaping to unlock the talent and your mana pool. Then we can speed along the basic leveling process with the Enslavement Mage progression. Enslavement Mage. Teal must have seen the confusion in Nathan's face, and the Archmage looked self-satisfied as he explained further. The Enslavement Mage path is the fastest path to mental magic if you have the resources. And I do. Hear me, but there are mental spells that allow directly imparting knowledge to another, and I would have you master them as soon as possible. He nodded again, eyes gazing into the distance as he planned. Then it will be possible to impart your knowledge to the necessary craftspeople and realize the wonders of your world here on Davrar. I had hoped you would have a teaching class already, so you could effectively explain things, but truly mages and magic are superior to all other classes in all things. Oh, is it not wonderful that I can design your advancement? Truly perfect. He squirmed in excitement. Teal had continued to shove food into his mouth as he spoke excitedly. The combination of chewing while speaking and additional food sprayed from Teal's mouth turned Nathan off the platter, but not as much as the rising tide of dread sparked by Teal's words. I do not like where this is going at all. I want to explore magic for myself. Thank you very much. Nathan tried to get a word in edgewise to ask for clarification, but Teal plowed right over him. Of course, I must assuage my curiosity before we begin and establish the conditions of our partnership. I will ask you questions as to how your world accomplishes these things, and you will answer. First, what is your full name? Then how do those metal boxes move along the ground? There is no magic, but they move by themselves. What moves them? I must know. He sure likes to talk. I can't just refuse to answer him, but I need more information. He cast around for a good alternative subject to assuage Teal, speaking as he thought frantically. My name is Nathan Lark. And I apologize for answering a question with a question, but what is Davrar? Is it the name of your world? Is there a person named Davrar granting people power? How do these classes work? Teal eyed Nathan and frowned for a second before responding. It is understandable. I respect curiosity about such things. I would share frustration at being ignorant of something so basic. He leaned back and spread his hands wide. Our world is called Davrar, and it grants us the powers of talents and classes and all the rest. Scholars of renown say that Davrar is the will of the world, ensuring that thinking beings survive against the horrors of monsters and endings. Teal smirked slightly. One could wish it was a little more selective about what qualifies as civilized beings, and excluded some of the barbarians and intelligent monsters from its blessing, but we can fix that oversight on our own. Fearing what he was about to hear, Nathan pushed more on that last point. How will you fix that problem? Tial turned expectant eyes from the remaining food to Nathan. Of course, there is only one permanent solution. We must take control of their lands and either civilize them appropriately or replace them with good stock. How else? So they're not just slavers but genociders as well. I hate that I'm glad I look like them. But for now, I bet it makes him trust me more. Tial pointed a chicken bone at Nathan. I see what you're doing, boy, and I applaud you for it. You find yourself in an unfamiliar place and wish to learn as much as you can before you make any commitments. It reminds me of myself when I was your age, advancing up the ranks of the Ascendant Academy. He tossed the chicken bone back onto the platter dismissively, locking eyes with Nathan. But I must be clear as flawless gems. Your only path here is giving me what I want. You have no other options. You shall do it willingly, and I will raise you up to stand ascendant in magic, just under me. Else, I will dominate your mind and force you to tell me your truths. If you prove stubborn, I will transfer your soul to a golem core and extract your knowledge from a screaming husk. Sweat broke out all over Nathan's body, and adrenaline shocked into his veins. Tial seemed entirely serious, and he gazed at Nathan without hesitance or pity. Nathan did the only thing he could think of. He brought back the window for his pending talent and approved it. This might make it harder for me to learn magic later, but I need all the protection I can get from this archmage who just threatened to rip out my soul. And I need it now. Congratulations, you have accepted the high-tier magic resistance talent. It will become a permanent part of your status and rank up as you use it. It starts at rank 1 and becomes more effective as it ranks up. Think about how you use your talent's functions to aid in talent development at rank 10. And it says it's permanent. Well, that's a problem for future Nathan. Current Nathan needs to deal with a genocidal archmage staring at me from across the table, who just demanded to know how cars worked. Nathan reached for a bite of food to give himself some more time to think, picking up a piece of cheese from the edge of the platter that looked to have avoided the worst of Tial's messy eating habits. I could just tell him. It's not like a basic explanation of internal combustion engines will start an industrial revolution. I certainly don't know enough to make one from scratch. There's a lot involved in a car. But on the other hand, not only was this the start of a slippery slope, but maybe the very idea of how to convert expanding gas into rotational energy would interact with some magic Nathan didn't know about. Nathan couldn't be sure he wasn't handing some important secret to Tial if he told him anything. All of a sudden, Nathan found that somebody making direct personal threats against him to break his principles didn't make him anxious. It made him enormously pissed off. He was not going to teach this genocidal maniac about technology. He would rather die than enable Tial's goals. That conclusion settled into Nathan's mind, and Davra reacted. Pending talent. Moderate-tier resolute mind, you have resolved to refuse to violate your principles in the face of overwhelming power. This talent will make that decision into a personal talent. You will be harder to persuade to change your mind, and be extra resistant to talents and skills that can charm or influence you. You will also have minor resistance to mental magic geared at influencing you. Less effective on high-tier talents and spells. Nathan once more found he could understand the box's contents almost instantly. He rejected the talent just as quickly. Harder to persuade to change your mind. That sounds more like a curse than a blessing. It would make me useless at science, forever, for very little benefit. Only an arrogant idiot presumes they're always right. The only thing I'm sure about right now is that Tial's an asshole. Tial tapped his fingers on the table impatiently. Nathan took a deep breath and tried to stop quivering with rage. He was playing for time and information now until he could figure out how to escape. Time to put on an act. Maybe he has a truth spell or something. Try not to directly lie. Nathan gave a faint nod to Teal. It does appear better for us both if I cooperate willingly. I apologize for my reaction, but you must have noticed that my world is generally peaceful. We have wars, but most people never experience violence. The talk of wiping out peoples is shocking to me. Teal pursed his lips at Nathan, then shrugged, and with an offhand wave of his hand cast a spell. Charmed Nathan's eyes saw double for a second. Had he really seen that gesture and heard that spell? Surely his good friend Teal wouldn't do such a thing. He was a nice guy, and he was going to teach Nathan magic. Why was he refusing to talk about combustion engines? They were really neat. It was fun to explain the basics of science. Nathan had spent a lot of volunteer hours in college doing science demos and explaining basic science and technology to younger kids. He even had a cool explanation worked out for how combustion pressure was used to drive motion. Surely he could just explain this basic thing to Teal. And then Teal would teach him magic. Teal, the asshole who threatened me with the worst kind of mental magic. That charm was pretty goddamn violating. The moment faded, and Nathan felt the effect slide off him. The spell tingled as it disentangled itself from his head and puffed away, leaving Nathan clear-eyed and suffused with cold rage. While Nathan had been struggling with the spell, Teal had been talking, extolling the greatnesses of his culture, it sounded like. And of course, the barbarians have none of that. What will they do when the next ending comes? Cower in their hovels and beg their ancestors to save them? No, Giants' Rest brings enlightenment to those we conquer, and we raise them up for it. We are harsh at times, but it is an absolute necessity. Many peoples have strange and ridiculous superstitions and traditions that prevent them from properly fitting into our nation. But the Ascendant Academy is open to all peoples if they can pass the entrance exam, and our civilizing influence will truly save the world. That is a truth of the fist. Teal's eyes were positively beady as he surveyed Nathan again, gauging the effect of his spell and speech. He apparently decided it wasn't enough. Charmed this time, Nathan felt the spell hit and blinked, his eyes closed for a moment against the tingling sensation. He stilled his mind in an instant to focus entirely on the feeling of the spell trying to dig hooks into his reasoning. The spell slid off once more, like a wave of pins and needles rippling over his skull. High-tier magic resistance rank 2 achieved. Teal had asked Nathan a question. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" Teal frowned slightly, then repeated his question. "Therefore, with such a glorious cause as ours, don't you think you can satisfy my curiosity? It's a simple question. How do those metal boxes move along the ground?" It didn't seem like this was about Teal's curiosity anymore. Nathan not answering the question had angered Teal, and he wanted to establish his authority and get an answer. Nathan didn't see any way to avoid the question. He hoped that Teal wouldn't jump straight to mind control, but he couldn't think of an evasion. He thought about jumping Teal, but there was a table in the way and the golem still stood by the door. He needed time to think and plan, to rank up his magic resistance before he challenged Teal for real. He should go with a soft refusal. "I'm so sorry, Teal, but I'm feeling overwhelmed and confused right now. You have some really good arguments, and I need to think them over. Can you give me some time to try to understand everything that's happened? I also want to hear more about how your culture governs subjects and how the academy works. It sounds like an amazing place to learn magic." It was weak, and Nathan knew it was weak. But he'd been the target of 2 mind-affecting spells in as many minutes, so it was the best he could do. Teal seemed to agree. He sighed and stood. "You're a soft, sentimental boy, but surprisingly resistant to charm spells. It would be so much better to have you cooperate willingly. We will try again. Next time, I won't threaten you or mention the inferior peoples at all." Paralysis. Nathan's body froze in his chair. He was breathing, but every voluntary muscle had frozen. He couldn't blink, couldn't move his eyes. It nearly caused him to panic until he focused on the adrenaline still coursing through him. He tried to throw off the paralysis like he had the charm, but it wasn't working. The tingling of the spell stayed anchored firmly in his muscles, blocking or jamming all the messages sent to them. He focused on his right hand, trying to throw his entire will into twitching a finger. Nothing happened. He pushed harder and still nothing happened. Tial was slowly walking around the table, coaxing a faint glow along in his hand. He seemed to be muttering under his breath, but Nathan couldn't spare the attention to listen. He focused again on his right hand, this time imagining sucking the energy in his hands into his bones. He felt something moving, like there was another sense in his hand, detecting not pressure or heat but something wispier. He drew that wispy feeling out of the muscles and into the bones of his hand and arm, naming the bones as the feeling drifted past. Ulna, radius, the big ones. All the phalanges in the hand, then the mess of small bones in the wrist. They're all sponges, soaking up the magic in the muscles around them. His hand twitched and then came completely under his control once again. Satisfaction bloomed in Nathan's mind, competing with the terror. He focused on doing the same to the rest of his body. It wasn't easy, the paralysis pervaded him and wasn't letting go. But slowly the spell started to unravel. High-tier magic resistance rank 3 achieved, and he was out of time. Tial's hand came down on his face. Memory Purge, Chapter 4. Putting the pieces together, and Athen woke up in an unfamiliar bed, his back itchy against the lumpy mattress. He shifted, and the heavy blanket twisted with him. Much heavier than the blanket he usually slept with. What was going on? He opened his eyes and looked around the room, slowly waking up. He had a bit of a headache, and it felt like he'd had a particularly intense dream that he couldn't quite grasp. The last thing he remembered was dropping his backpack on his carpet in his apartment. And what was up with this room? Seamless stone on all 6 surfaces, like it had been carved out of raw rock and then smoothed until the stone gleamed. All of the corners were slightly rounded. There was a light in the middle of the ceiling, and it looked like a glowing rock. A table with 2 chairs sat in the center of the room, with a bowl of fruit set out on the table. On the other side of the room was a water trough underneath a toilet seat, with an empty cup next to it. That's not hygienic at all. Nathan got up to inspect the strange room in more detail. Nothing was manufactured, all the furniture looked handmade. This seemed like way too much effort for a prank, and who would put in this much effort to prank him? Unless he was on a weird reality TV show. But those required waivers and things, unless they wanted to get sued out of existence. He recognized none of the fruit, not even from that weird Asian fruit box his dad had sent him once. Where was he? Something drifted up from his barely remembered dream, a feeling of certainty. A different world. That must have been some dream he'd had. It still bounced around in his head, but nothing about it was clear beyond an overwhelming sense of fear and anger. But here he was, somewhere he couldn't explain. Maybe I should give the dream more credit. I'm not one to get mystical at all, but this feels different from normal. Maybe I should have kept up with the lucid dreaming stuff. Nathan realized he was parched and looked in vain for another source of water, but there was nothing other than a handy cup near the toilet trough. Damn it. He scooped up a cup of water and sat on the toilet seat to drink it, studying the wall from close-up. It was nice rock, well polished, with a moderate grain to it. The sort of rock people paid a lot for in houses. The water was clean and about as cold as you get from a tap. Then Nathan blinked. Scratched into the rock in front of him was a familiar Turing chemical structure. Caffeine, what the hell? And a single tick mark next to it. For some reason, that drawing filled him with anxiety, a yawning pit opening up in his gut. Nathan stared at the symbol of wakefulness and feared what it meant. Wake up. That's what caffeine does to you. Nathan staggered back to the bed, sitting on the soft surface as his breathing quickened. He pinched himself. He felt a crushing weight on his chest, like it was impossible to take a breath. He cradled his head in his hands, a foggy brain and tight chest threatening to make him pass out. No, Sit up straight, deep breaths. This is why you learn to meditate. You don't have the app, but you can still clear your mind. Start by focusing on your breath. In through the nose, down the throat, into the lungs. Feel your lungs expand all the way out, the rib cage opening up. Then breathe out, slowly. Again, now focus on your body. It's a cloud of sensations and your consciousness fills all of it. You're not asleep because you can feel your body so clearly. Everything is contained within your consciousness and you control all of it. Minutes passed and Nathan's mind emptied as his breath came deep and even. Once he felt calmer, Nathan broadened his thoughts past his physical sensations. What now? I have clues. I'm somewhere weird with all sorts of inexplicable things. A glowing rock, handmade furniture, weird fruit, and a weird toilet. I have a fragment of a dream in my head about being in a different world. And there's a chemical structure I know well carved into the rock in my cell. That is the sort of message I would leave myself. Did I forget something? Was I made to forget something? Everything pointed back to the dream. He needed to remember what it was about before his sense of it faded entirely. Nathan shifted his entire focus to the hazy memory in the back of his head, and he tried to call it up, to relive the dream. But it was slippery, passing through his fingers of concentration like a wispy cloud. No, it's like there's a thin pane blocking my efforts. The dream's right there, but something's stopping me from remembering it. Nathan captured the sensation in his mind's eye, examining it within this meditative state. It was like an angled piece of glass deflecting his attention to the side. Nathan pictured himself dispersing it like he did unwanted thoughts. There was a distinctly physical sensation, like a skin-tight net around his head falling apart, and then he remembered everything that had happened yesterday. Exposure to vacuum, Tial's summoning room, the messages from Davrar, the subsequent conversation with Tial, and the mind wipe. Tial is a rampaging asshole. He opened his eyes and saw 3 blue boxes waiting for him. High-tier magic resistance rank 4 achieved. Good. Ranking up that skill was almost certainly his path to survival and freedom. Pending utility skill. Low-tier focused mind, you have used mental exercises to avoid panic and focus on what was necessary. This skill will help you attain a focused and undistracted state more easily when you need it. Requires you to be seated, unmoving and with eyes closed to use. As far as Nathan could tell, that was only beneficial, and there didn't seem to be a limit on the number of utility skills he could have. Even if there was, being focused and calm was invaluable. He accepted the skill. Congratulations, you have accepted the low-tier focused mind utility skill. It will become a part of your status and rank up as you use it. It starts at rank 1 and becomes more effective as it ranks up. Think about how you use your skill to aid in skill development at rank 10. Then Nathan turned to the 3rd box. You have leveled up to level 3. Congratulations, you have defeated high-tier mental magic with very few resources. It will be harder to level up as you gain a higher level. That was nice. It seemed like he didn't have to kill anything, just overcome difficult challenges to level up. Now what? It was time to plan, time to figure out his next steps. Nathan wished he had some scratch paper and a pencil to list what he knew and what options he had. It was the same way he planned experiments, and he wanted to use the familiar process to help organize his thoughts. But he hadn't seen anything like that in the room, and he didn't want to leave any evidence for Tial to find next time he knocked Nathan out and erased his memories, if there is a next time. He implied he'd take more drastic measures eventually. What was it? Oh yeah, stick your soul in a golem core and extract knowledge from your screaming husk. Charming. Nathan closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He'd never felt anger like this before. Luckily, focused mind helped him stay on track. I need to think clearly. This isn't a situation anger will get me out of. If TL did decide to go another round with the mind wipe, Nathan needed to put in more insurance. He looked around for an object to mark the wall with. The only metal object in the room, aside from some nails holding the furniture together, was the dish the fruit came in. It wasn't ideal, but it served to make another tick mark next to the caffeine molecule. Nathan sighed, thinking about other ways to help him remember if T.L. wiped his memory again. He could just write, "You've been mind-wiped," and so long as he saw it and T.L. didn't, he'd have a bit of insurance. Nathan was also pretty sure T.L. didn't understand English. But if he can teach me a language with a spell, he might be able to translate it back. Anyway, let's plan on how to get out of here without getting memory purged again. My new skill should help. Nathan closed his eyes and focused again, once more finding it easier than ever to banish extraneous thoughts and focus on how to deal with T.L. and escape. Should he try to catch T.L. by surprise and attack him as soon as possible? That plan would let Nathan punch T.L. in the face, which was certainly appealing. And T.L. wouldn't expect an attack right after the mind wipe. The longer Nathan waited, the more chances T.L. would have to catch on. That would probably lead him to take drastic measures. On the other hand, Nathan knew nothing about where he was or anything about T.L.'s magical defenses. He needed more information to develop a plan beyond punch T.L. in the face and try to find an exit. What if he was in the middle of the academy that T.L. had mentioned? I also can't help but think that magic resistance is my trump card. I want to wait as long as possible and rank it up as much as I can before it's revealed. Okay, so if attacking T.L. was a bad idea, how about sneaking out? Nathan wouldn't have to confront the Archmage, but he still faced all of the same problems, in addition to a bar on the door. It was worth keeping in mind, but there would have to be a good opening. So it seemed that Nathan would have to talk to T.L. again and pretend to know nothing. Nathan knew he wasn't great at being deceptive, but it didn't look like he had a choice. At least all he had to do was play dumb. But how could Nathan get the information he needed? Well, the first step to manipulation was to look at the other person's perspective. T.L. believed in his own superiority and the power of his magic. He'd wiped Nathan's memories of their previous conversation and was probably taking time to plan out the perfect series of lies to get Nathan on his side. It would have been smarter for T.L. to not give Nathan any time to break the mind magic. But T.L. probably thought his magic was flawless, and there was no way for Nathan to break it. Maybe he wanted Nathan to stew in an unfamiliar setting before swinging in to rescue him. Or maybe he simply had other things on his plate than a dimensional abductee with the secrets of Industrial Revolution. Seems unlikely. He wants me to help him change the world. Well, if he wasn't going to attack T.L., Nathan should conform to the Archmage's expectations as much as possible. He should act confused and be grateful to T.L. for any friendliness or explanation. But that had to have a limit. He had to have a justification for refusing to follow T.L.'s plans. Should he get T.L. to teach him magic? It would be tricky to do without giving up anything, but the possibility was there. On the other hand, Nathan reminded himself there were some really good reasons not to learn magic. His magic resistance skill would interfere with it, and that could clue T.L. in on what was happening. Also, there was a chance that if he picked up more skills or talents right now, then his magic resistance skill would not rank up as quickly. I just don't know enough about how this system works to want to rely on it for any part of this plan. The magic resistance I understand, at least partially. But how that interacts with other talents, classes, and skills is unknown territory. Come to think of it, that would have been a good reason to hold off on accepting Focused Mind. But it was already proving its value, letting him plan without being interrupted by gibbering fear about deciding to oppose an apparently genocidal city-kingdom empire single-handedly. But I want to learn magic. Come on, it's right there. Just get T.L. to teach you. Tough. Nathan wasn't going to jeopardize this plan to learn what T.L. called magic. Magic didn't have to be manipulating mana. Talent seemed like a close approximation, and that would have to be enough, at least for now. Should he try to pick up any other talents or skills immediately? If he could find anything to help with the immediate situation, he should probably take it. But unless he could figure out a talent to burrow through solid rock, the only thing that made sense was getting better at lying to Teal and stringing him along. Nathan opened his eyes to yet another blue box. Low-tier focused mind rank 2 achieved. Nice. Now it was time to try lying to a wall for a while to see if he could pick up a deception skill. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 5. The second discussion it turned out that Davrar did not reward lying to inanimate objects. That was fair. Not long after he'd finished failing to convince the wall that it really was, in fact, made of small particles of silica and was not truly a contiguous solid, the door opened, and a golem walked through, carrying a plate of roasted vegetables. Nathan did his best to act like a confused world traveler with no knowledge of how he had gotten there, asking random questions starting with, "Where am I?" moving on to "Who are you?" and ending with, "What is this place?" The golem had ignored him, placing the food on the table and removing the now empty bowl of fruit. When Nathan made a half-hearted move toward the door, the golem had sped up, quickly moving to the door before closing and barring it. Nathan inspected the meal and was quite pleased to note that the roasted zucchini had come with a fork. A two-pronged fork where the prongs were nearly an inch and a half apart, but still a metal utensil. Huzzah! He sat down on his side of the table and quickly scratched 3 words in small text into the side that faced him. "You've been neuralized" was pretty close to "you've been mind-wiped." But the extra level of obfuscation through misspelling a pop reference seemed like a good idea. Added to his terrible handwriting and the unknown language, it seemed unlikely Teal could read it even if he did find it. Unless there was a translate spell that had a spell check and worked on cultural references. Man, magic is bullshit. The kind of bullshit I want to use, but that's looking less and less likely. I pitted my ideals against my childhood dreams and the ideals won. It wasn't even much of a contest. That makes me pretty proud of myself, actually. Go Nathan. Just need to deal with the consequences now. Nathan sat down to munch on the plate of grilled green veggies. They weren't bad, cold, and a little soggy, but naturally a bit peppery in a way that combined nicely with the crisped edges. Nathan could only hope it didn't contain allergens that would cause his throat to close up. He was almost done with the plate when he heard the door being unbarred again. Nathan did his best to look up in a hopeful and confused manner when Teal entered the room, the golem striding behind the archmage. Teal was in another orange robe, this one decorated with shiny stones around the hems and sleeves. As he was sliding into the chair, Nathan politely asked, "Can you please tell me what is going on?" Teal looked gravely at Nathan. "My boy, I do apologize, but I must be clear as flawless gems with you. First, allow me an introduction. I'm Teal Dho Droxile, a researcher at the Ascendant Academy. You find yourself in a new world. As much as it twists my thumb to admit it, my understanding of what occurred is limited." Teal sat heavily in the chair, rubbing his forehead as if at his wit's end. "I believe that some cosmic force moved you across dimensions to this world. I was conducting an experiment to probe dimensional quasi-resonance, and my utter harmonic went out of control. Entirely beyond expectation, and much expensive equipment was destroyed. But right where the primary phase resonator had broken, I found you, lying on the secondary tuning rod. Before we continue, may I ask your name?" That sounded like technobabble intended to confuse him. Magi babble. Regardless, it seemed like Teal was trying to sell Nathan a story where he'd appeared here by chance and destroyed valuable equipment in the process. He had to pretend to believe it and play into the effect that Teal was going for. He wished he could take back telling his name to Teal earlier in case it gave him some magical advantage, but he'd done it while trying to stall and couldn't take it back. Oh, that is a lot to take in. Nathan made a show of taking a deep breath before looking back at T.L. earnestly. My name is Nathan Lark. Thank you for the explanation, but I'm still so confused. I'm sorry to hear that I destroyed some valuable equipment. This is all a big shock for me. I was panicking earlier trying to figure out what was going on. I have a lot of questions. You must have incredible technology to be working on something like dimensional science. T.L. seemed satisfied with the answer and smiled gently. He gestured with a hand, and Nathan saw the spell coming before the word left T.L.'s mouth. Charmed Nathan let his eyes go unfocused for a moment, the same way it had happened the first time. He blinked slowly, focusing his mind to banish the seductive, foreign thoughts as they flowed into him with a prickling sensation. Low-tier focused mind rank 3 achieved. No, my friend Nathan, we do not use technology. On Davrar, we use magic to bend the world to our will. I take it from your response that your world does not have magic. Would you like to learn magic? T.L. conjured a floating ball of smooth orange light over one hand, and his smile changed into something predatory. He knew what Nathan wanted and was leveraging it and his mental magic to strike right at Nathan's weaknesses. Nathan knew what the right response was. Luckily, it wasn't hard to channel his excitement for magic. He didn't have to try hard to make his eyes bug out at one of the first overt displays of magic he'd ever seen. Magic? That's incredible. Can I learn it? How does it work? Where does the energy come from? Is that an easy spell to learn? How long will it take before I could cast it? He pointed to the orb of light, doing his best to act like he'd forgotten his misgivings and was entirely excited about learning magic. Pretty much the same as the first time he'd learned about magic from T.L. Pending utility skill, low-tier earnestness, you have done a good job conveying seriousness and honesty to a suspicious observer. This skill will help you portray your intense conviction and honesty when you speak to people. Cannot compel actions beyond what natural speech could, and cannot fool truth spells or skills. Not exactly what Nathan had in mind, but beggars couldn't be choosers, and it seemed like it would help here. He accepted the skill. Congratulations, you have accepted the low-tier earnestness utility skill. It will become a part of your status and rank up as you use it. It starts at rank 1 and becomes more effective as it ranks up. Think about how you use your skill to aid in skill development at rank 10. Those messages were getting repetitive. While he'd been considering the skill, T.L. had started talking. Forgive that, and I would be sure as a good glove that you can learn magic. I'd like to get you started on a mage class soon. With my enormous guidance, we could have you casting light spells such as this by week's end. But if you have no magic, I would love to hear how your people do things. This technology sounds fascinating and I would love to hear about it. If your people have no classes, how do you accomplish anything? Nathan nodded, noticing T.L.'s slip. He hadn't told T.L. he didn't have a class yet. I'm sorry, but classes. Do you mean something like educational degrees? T.L. flushed a bit in response, so it was probably a mistake, and not T.L. trying to probe Nathan's memory. The Archmage rushed to explain classes again, this time omitting the mention of less civilized thinking beings that had drawn Nathan's attention the first time. Then he closed by saying, but talents, classes, and skills are essential to all we do. My civilization, no civilization, could long survive without them against the monsters and endings of this world. Then, I ask you, even if your world has no monsters, no endings, how do you accomplish anything? Endings. Not actually important right now. For now, Nathan had an opening to convince T.L. of his usefulness as a thinking, free agent, and hopefully put off the whole Golem Core thing. He leaned into his earnestness, speaking about something he cared deeply about. I have dedicated my life to furthering our technology, and had nearly attained the highest education my world offers before. He gestured around the room. Knowledge is shared freely in my world. We have a saying among my people. If I see further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. It means that even though I may not be as wise or as smart as my predecessors, I can learn all they discovered and then surpass them in knowledge. Nathan spread his hands, as though laying his secrets upon the table. Lotier earnestness rank 2 achieved. Tial clasped his hands tightly together, listening to Nathan with the slightly teary eyes of a man who just heard a beautiful sermon. Amazing. When we lose a titan, their skills and talents die with them. When you lose one, their skills and knowledge are taught to the next generation. What a grand world that must be. He wiped at his eyes, looking rueful. Ah, but can we make it real here? My people hoard insights like dragons, only to be dispensed to their trusted heirs and loyal students, if at all. Only a fist of steel, one armed with advantage and insight beyond all others, could break that culture. Will you give me the strength of your fist in this, Nathan? Together, we could raise the banner of knowledge, take what is best of your world and use it in this one. He raised his hands dramatically with that, gesturing with one hand in a now familiar gesture. Charm, it was a remarkably persuasive argument, Nathan had to admit. But as the spell washed around him and passed by, Nathan reminded himself of Tial's past actions. He was not the beacon of knowledge and truth that he pretended to be. Tial Dho Droxal was a scheming man convinced his own superiority justified any means necessary to assert his dominance. He'd thrown away any chance of Nathan ever willingly cooperating with him the first time he'd cast charm. Looking up, Nathan saw Tial watching carefully to see his reaction. Then he gestured again, his voice louder, more insistent, and the glow from his mouth stronger. Charm, the spell, was clearly cast with more strength, meant to overcome any resistance. Nathan allowed his eyes to go unfocused for a moment while he bent his will to overcome the spell. A tingling latched onto his brain, but Nathan siphoned it off into the bones of his skull with precise concentration. The spell faded without effect a moment later. High-tier magic resistance rank 5 achieved. You have leveled up to level 5. Congratulations, you have resisted your opponent's attempts to persuade you. It will be harder to level up as you gain a higher level. Nathan smiled, and Tial smiled with him. Then Nathan gave the only answer that Tial would accept, mimicking Tial's speech patterns as best he could. Of course, I will help you. This is a much grander path than I expected to walk in life, but you do me honor by allowing me to walk it with you. He's given me his best shot, and I've pretended to buy it. There's never going to be a better time to probe for information. But please, I have so much to learn about this world. It is unlike my own, and I cannot picture what we could even accomplish here. Can I ask where we are? I want to know about your government and society, to learn my place within it. I don't want to disgrace you if I should meet another prominent member of your academy. Nathan could feel his earnestness skill activating, guiding his voice and face to express honest curiosity and sincerity as he tried to pump Tial for information. Low-tier earnestness rank 3 achieved. Tial seemed taken in by Nathan's acting, smiling in a self-satisfied fashion. It is good you are thinking ahead, but you should not have to worry about that for some time. We are currently in my personal research tower, a ways to the west of Giant's Rest, and there are no other living beings in this tower to worry about. Just me, my golems, and my experiments. He waved a hand around, encompassing the room and the building beyond. It was given to me with the title of researcher, for it is traditional to conduct experiments away from cities and towns. We will not be disturbed, as we are protected by golem, ward, and trap. There will be plenty of time to tutor you in scholarly etiquette before I present you to the Ascendant Academy and the Council of Archmages. I am not due back for a month at least, and I look forward to what we can accomplish in that time. The town of Halsmit is a short way to the south, and I will take you there next time I visit the brothel to give you an introduction to our culture. Okay then. That's the bare minimum of what I needed to know, and it's better than I could have hoped for. We're in the wilderness and there's nobody else around. I need to watch out for the golems, but I hope my magic resistance can help me deal with the wards and traps. Nathan still hoped to get more information from Tial, but every exchange increased the risk that Tial would figure him out. It was time to switch priorities toward escape. Nathan nodded to Tial and looked over at the golem, thinking about how to get the golem out of the room and get a jump on Tial. I don't know if my anti-magic will do squat against the golem, and I don't want to risk everything on getting lucky. I probably need to wait for Tial to send it somewhere. Can I ask for something? And then since Tial needs to speak to cast his spells, I can hopefully punch him in the throat and just run. Tial asked, "How would you like to start our teachings? I have many questions to ask you, but you also must have many questions for me. Of magic." Nathan nodded absent-mindedly, trying to think of a plan to divert the golem out of the room. "Is there anything you need to have the golem fetch to teach me mana shaping? I'd love to get started on that." Maybe Tial would send the golem away, or at the very least Nathan could potentially get more exposure to magic and rank up magic resistance some more. Tial froze and his eyes narrowed. He stood up and took a few steps towards the door. "I never mentioned mana shaping. Not today." Nathan broke out in a cold sweat on realizing his mistake. "Shit, I blew it." After all my plans, one slip of the tongue throws the game. He stood up and started slowly walking around the table to approach Tial. "No, I meant, you mentioned mana earlier, and it makes sense that you'd need the mana shaping ability to be a mage." Tial wasn't buying it, taking a few more steps backwards. "You've been strangely resistant to my charms. You must have somehow broken my memory spell. You didn't think I would notice. You tried to fool me." Tial snarled in what was probably supposed to be an intimidating manner, but came off more afraid than anything else. That fear showed weakness, and Nathan lunged across the last few feet toward Tial. Maybe he could get in close and hammer the Archmage before he could get off a decisive spell. Paralysis. But Tial could cast spells as quickly as he could speak. Nathan felt his muscles lock up, staggering and falling mid-step as his body fell asleep all at once. He frantically pulled at the feeling of paralysis in his muscles, but his focus was broken by his cheek slamming into the ground in front of Tial's slippers. Nathan's head swam as Tial spoke gloatingly from above. "Magic is superior to all. You have given up a chance many would cut off their thumbs for, and now you will lose all you have, you stupid boy." Slumber, a heavy fog descended upon Nathan's mind, pushing at his consciousness. His eyes prickled and magically slid closed. Nathan desperately sharpened his attention with focused mind, hanging onto awareness by his fingernails. Tial spoke again, and the words were spikes of meaning that Nathan grabbed a hold of to avoid falling into the beckoning pit of unconsciousness. "Take him to the golem creation room and put him on the table." When the sound faded, Nathan focused on the cold, stone hands that manhandled him into an over-the-shoulder carry. The hard stone of the golem's body dug into his stomach and hips, providing a discomfort Nathan brought to the front of his mind. As he was carried out the door and down the hallway, the suffocating tiredness lessened. Nathan was still paralyzed, but at least he wasn't about to pass out entirely. He could feel the wispy sensation of the slumber more clearly now. It was filling his head like a nasty hangover, itchy and cloying. It wouldn't slide off like the charm spell, or sink into his bones like paralysis did. The sleep spell was a sticky net adhering to his thoughts, weighing them down to the point of unconsciousness. So, Nathan tried to burst the net. He recalled as much as possible of the manic state he'd found after trying some internet-ordered stimulants. He imagined bright blue skies over the mountains he'd grown up in, dredged up memories of the martial arts he'd practiced in high school, and the beautiful design of optics in super-resolution microscopy. The net tore, swamped by the number of memories pressing at the edges. The spell fell apart in fragments, subsumed by Nathan's mind. He tried to sigh in relief, but he was still paralyzed and draped over the back of a golem. Right, of course. How could I forget? One thing after another, ain't that just the way the humor kept the fear at bay a bit? He knew how to break the paralysis, and concentrated on doing just that. This time it was much easier, and the tingling sensation quickly faded away. Nathan didn't know if that was thanks to his focused mind, the rank-ups in the magic resistance, or just practice feeling the spell and breaking its patterns. Before he was quite finished, the golem smoothly followed Tial into a room and gently lowered him face up onto a large stone table at its center. Low-tier focused mind rank 4 achieved. High-tier magic resistance rank 6 achieved. Before Nathan could do anything, Tial cast another spell. Chains of Restraint. Nathan hastily shut his eyes again as slick magical chains sprung from the base of the table and wrapped around his limbs and across his torso. He surreptitiously flexed his arms and legs to check his paralysis, and the chains tightened to restrict him further. Oh, come on. This guy is so damn paranoid. At least he's using magic and not real chains. I can break these cuffs. He was definitely feeling a bit punch-drunk, but Nathan wasn't sure if it was a response to the mind magic he'd resisted so far, or his impending fate as an animated rock. Breaking the thin but immobilizing chains seemed like an important next step. Nathan tried tugging against the chains but felt absolutely no give in them. His admittedly limited strength was not the answer here. He needed to use his talent. Once again, he reached out to a new kind of magic, hoping he could resist it somehow. And it's not like I have a plan B. He focused on where the chains dug into his flesh. There was a feeling beyond the merely physical. He visualized the chains, felt them engraved in his consciousness by more than just touch. The feeling wasn't wispy this time, but harder, more structured. Nathan didn't think he could do the same thing he'd done to the mental spells here. The magic didn't flow. But maybe it could break. He tried hitting the structure with his will, imagining using his consciousness as a hammer to shatter the chains. Nothing happened. Tial was busy against the back wall of the space, sounding like he was sorting through a full toolbox. He commanded the golem, go get an empty golem core from the second magical storage space. A grandmaster quality, I think. I want the highest quality imbuing right now. Minimal loss of memory would be best. Nathan heard the door open and close. The golem is gone. Now or never, this may be impossible, but you only win if you play as if it is possible. How might it work? Winning answers only, please. He'd succeeded in resisting magic before by utilizing the inherent magic resistance of his body, and whatever magical sense the talent had given him. To resist charm magic, he'd noticed and denied the intrusive thoughts, and the spell had evaporated. The paralysis had needed to be drawn out of his muscles and into his bones. The sleep magic had been overwhelmed by frantic thoughts. In each case, he'd found a key element of the spell and subverted it until the whole structure had fallen apart. What was the appropriate key element of these chains? They had a detailed structure, as if each link in the chain was a tightly packed mass of geometric shapes. It reminded him of how DNA was packed into chromosomes, strands of looped coil, each coil composed of a yet smaller string. Except here the string was made of tightly wrapped but unknotted energy. Force. The analogy fell apart at that level. The strings themselves felt tough, like an extremely thin metal wire. Nathan picked a chain that was tight around his stomach, where he imagined a single loop of wire in a coil. He focused on grabbing a single wire and pulling, yanking with his mental fingers right into his gut. The string responded quickly to Nathan's intention. It flowed into him and stung slightly, like a needle poking skin. But as the magic entered his body, it became less substantial, sliding down an energy gradient from solid to insubstantial to non-existent. The link Nathan had focused on fuzzed out, and the entire structure of the chains loosened slightly. Oh, thank the gods! Whichever ones might exist here. Nathan wasn't paying attention to his surroundings, and he flinched as his head was lifted by fleshy hands. Tial placed some kind of metal disc under his head, folding up flexible metal arms that rested on his temples. Nathan tried to ignore it and pulled on more threads. He could only manage 3 at a time, focusing on his arms first. It only took seconds per chain, but there were a lot of chains. Then, all of a sudden, Nathan could do 4 at a time. Probably a rank up, but he didn't open his eyes to check. Now that he could do something about the chains, he was feeling claustrophobic, and he wanted out. The chains across his chest were suddenly unacceptably tight, and Nathan tried to ignore the rising tide of panic as Tial turned and gathered his tools with the scrape of metal on stone. I don't know what he's doing, and I don't want to find out. The last chain around his arms loosened. It was getting easier now, the entire structure of the spell falling apart. From directly above him, Nathan heard a confused gasp and knew he had run out of time. His eyes snapped open. Low-tier focused mind rank 5 achieved. High-tier magic resistance rank 7 achieved. The boxes vanished with a twitch of intention. They revealed Tial's face, wide-eyed and staring at the snapped chain links. He stood to Nathan's right, holding a spike capped with a green gem in one hand and a small hammer in the other, poised to drive the spike into Nathan's solar plexus. Nathan's left hand came up across his body, his hips and shoulders twisting as he drove a palm into Tial's face with all the force his back and shoulders could generate. It'll be hard for him to concentrate with a broken nose. Nathan's palm skated off a barrier of slick force a few inches in front of Tial's nose. The orange-robed man staggered back a few steps from surprise, though the force of the blow seemed to not affect him at all. Okay, now I have some more options, but they all start with getting free. Nathan sat up, pulling away from jeweled and engraved metal arms folded across his forehead. He tugged at the last few chains around his ankles as Tial took further steps back, pointing at Nathan with the spike and breathing heavily. You how? What kind of toxic power do you have? Instead of replying, Nathan shut his eyes again, frantically pulling on the strings of the remaining chains. They fell away in moments, and he quickly levered himself off the table and towards Tial. The mage had backed up until he ran into the workbench against his wall, and his eyes flicked to the door. Nathan sprung at him in the moment of distraction, but Tial cast just as quickly as last time. Paralysis, not this time. Nathan had seen the gesture coming and balanced himself so he wouldn't immediately fall. Then, he drained the magic out of his muscles nearly as fast as it came in, staggering but not falling. Tial's eyes bugged out further, and he reflexively held his hands out in front of his face. Nathan charged into him a moment later, relying on momentum to get through the defense spell, or at least knock Tial over. The barrier flexed as Nathan hit it, but he bounced off as if he'd shoulder-checked a stone pillar. Tial wasn't pushed back in the slightest. Ow, magic is bullshit. Conservation of momentum is a core physical law. At least Tial seemed to be panicking. He stared at Nathan like a man with 100 hammers seeing a screw for the first time. Nathan loomed over Tial and started searching for a gap in the barrier a few inches above Tial's skin, wrapping his arms around the man as he failed to find one. The shield flexed under his arms but didn't break. Time to test some hypotheses. Something will let me crack this shell and get to the gooey center. Nathan dug his fingers into the barrier on either side of Tial's shoulders and pulled as hard as he could, trying to rip the barrier apart. It cracked and tore, a brief blast of force pushing Nathan a few steps back. Tial's lips were moving, and Nathan could feel the mana of the spell he was weaving from several feet away. It was more powerful than anything Nathan had felt Tial cast before. Nathan raised his hands protectively in front of him, DDD disintegrate. A thin beam of pale green light shot from Tial's pointing finger and hit Nathan's left palm. Tial's face pulled into a satisfied rictus as Nathan's left hand fell apart. Pain blasted through him as first his wrist, then his forearm turned to black dust. He screamed. High-tier magic resistance rank 8 achieved. The wave of magic swept down Nathan's arm, and he felt his talent fight the spell as it consumed his inherently magic-resistant flesh. Nathan clutched his left arm with his right hand, unable to do anything but watch his arm slowly disintegrate. The advancing wave of mana felt like a hungry void, a consuming pit that would never be sated. High-tier magic resistance rank 9 achieved. Nathan pushed back, fighting to arrest the advancing tide of entropy. Not with any clever ideas, just with frantic desperation, and maybe it made a difference. As the spell passed his elbow, it slowed to a crawl. Both Tial and Nathan's eyes were glued to the advancing line of disintegrating flesh. Then, a few inches from his shoulder and with one final notification, it stopped. High-tier magic resistance rank 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this talent. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this talent to develop it to the next level. As it is high tier, the kind of insight will affect how it develops. Nathan fixed tear-filled eyes on Tial, whose victorious expression paled into terror. Nathan stalked forward. Paralysis. Nathan barely stumbled, overcoming the spell with sheer rage and a rather significant desire to beat Tial's face in. Tial quickly gathered magic for another powerful spell, but Nathan took a long step forward and pivoted his entire body, smashing his right elbow into Tial's nose. Nathan felt cartilage pulping under the blow and continued his turn, stomping on Tial's knee with his right foot. The leg folded with an unpleasant popping sound, and Tial dropped to the ground with a whimper past bloody lips. Nathan's absent left arm hurt, and he tried to cradle the missing limb as he turned to the door, whimpering. It was hard to think through the haze of pain and loss from his missing arm. God damn, that hurts. It is time to leave. I've never wanted to get outside more in my life, and that golem is coming back. Nathan stumbled to the door, pushed it open, and was 10 steps down the hall before he paused and turned around. I hurt Tial, but he won't die. I need to kill him. He's tried to do worse to me. He deserves to die. He's a powerful, vengeful mage, and if I don't kill him now, he'll come for me later. He's also a man named Tial Dho Droxal who seeks knowledge. If I kill him, I kill a story and all of the deeds he could ever do. The potential he represents. Nathan's face hardened and he walked back to the door into the golem creation room. A potential for great evil. Fucker took my arm. Kill him now, moralize about it later. He turned the corner and Tial looked up at him from across the room, pulped lips stuttering. TT teleport, and with an orange flash he was gone. You have leveled up to level 9. Congratulations, you have forced an extremely powerful and deadly opponent to flee. Please choose a class from the following list to continue leveling, as you have unlocked a higher level than 9. Potential classes. Student. You have spent decades learning knowledge from books and teachers. This class will enhance your capability to learn knowledge, offering skills to improve memory, comprehension, and intellect. It may develop into classes focused on discovering new knowledge, or teaching, recording and using already existing knowledge. Scientist. You have spent years engaged in pursuit of knowledge via careful scientific experimentation. This class will focus on discovery through experimentation, offering skills to improve your intellect, precision, and luck. It may develop into classes further focused on discovering new or lost knowledge, or classes focused on using or communicating your discoveries. Rebel, you have struck a blow against the Giant's Rest Dominion and escaped their custody. This class will make you capable of striking back, offering skills for disguise, sabotage, and combat. It may develop into classes focused on assassination, rabble-rousing, or political subterfuge. Martial monk. You have trained in hand-to-hand combat techniques as well as meditation and focusing your mind. This class will focus on mental discipline and using it to enhance hand-to-hand combat prowess, offering skills to improve mental focus, combat capability, and heightened awareness. It may develop into classes further specialized in combat, guiding others or achieving enlightenment. Explorer. You have explored forbidding lands far from home, journeying across continents to see natural wonders and foreign cultures. This class will focus on travel into new lands, offering skills for increasing travel speed, adapting to new societies, and surviving in the wild. It may develop into classes focused on unearthing lost ruins, information gathering, or trade and diplomacy. Disciple of magic. You can sense and manipulate flows of mana untrained, even if you have not yet cast a spell. This class will make you better able to sense and direct mana, offering skills for understanding magic as well as sensing and manipulating mana. It may develop into a more powerful spellcasting class, or a class which lets you subvert the magic of others more easily. Conman. You have lied to a prominent member of the Dominion and gotten away with it. This class will enable you to continue deceiving people, offering skills on disguise, deception, and manipulation. It may develop into classes focused on information gathering, assassination, or thievery. Anti-magic brawler. You have hand-to-hand combat training and neutralized a powerful mage and his magic with your bare fists. This class will make you tougher in combat, offering skills to improve combat, toughness, and anti-magic capability. It may develop into classes further focused on hand-to-hand combat or suppressing magic status of Nathan Lark. Permanent Talent 1. High-tier magic resistance 10 Talent 2. None Talent 3. None Class. None Level 9 plus Utility Skills. Low-tier Focused Mind 5 Low-tier Earnestness 3 Chapter 6 Escape. Athens stood in the doorway, caught between horror, relief, and a haze of pain. Tldho Droxal, the man who'd abducted him across dimensions, manipulated his mind and nearly ripped his soul out, had escaped. That's probably bad. He doesn't strike me as the type to forgive his injuries or forget the knowledge he wants from me. Nathan was still furious, and if the Archmage reappeared, he would do his best to crush the man's skull. But Nathan was having a hard time feeling bad over failing to kill a human being. Maybe if he ran far enough, fast enough, TL wouldn't catch up to him, but he needed to start now. As if to emphasize the point, he heard a scrape of stone on stone as the golem rounded the hall to Nathan's right. Nathan turned and ran down the hallway without a second look, awkwardly cradling the stump of his left arm. And I only have one arm now. Seems hard to forget that when it hurts so much. He heard the golem's heavy footsteps chasing him and rushed around a corner to find a wide flight of stairs winding around a huge square vertical shaft. A bright light shone down from the top, and the stairs and balustrade were made of the same seamless, pale stone as the rest of the tower. Nathan started running down the staircase, skipping 4 steps at a time in his haste. The golem turned the corner behind him, its stone feet slamming on the steps as it descended. It was fast but not great at turning corners on the staircase. Nathan continued down, looking over the edge for an exit. Nearly 100 feet down was a grand hall, with statues on the walls and a shallow fountain in the center. I'm not going to make it. TL mentioned more golems and traps, and this golem is going to catch up as soon as I get to a straightaway. I need something. Nathan had one more untapped resource, and he quickly reviewed the list of classes he'd been offered earlier as he bounced himself off a wall to turn onto the next flight of stairs. It was a good thing that the knowledge was more or less inserted into his head, since he couldn't exactly ask the golem for a timeout. The pain from his arm was a gnawing, biting thing, and these were terrible circumstances to make a decision. But this decision needed to be made now. Going off first impressions, most of the classes called to different parts of Nathan, except Conman and maybe Explorer. Student and scientist both aligned extraordinarily well with his adult life goals. However, Disciple of Magic appealed to a younger Nathan, the one wishing for magic over birthday candles. The one who feels betrayed learning that apparently the primary use of magic is to be a supreme shitlord. Unfortunately, Davrar seemed to be long on genocidal archmages and short on opportunities for graduate students in biology or magic, or at least ones that didn't involve giving up the knowledge of the Industrial Revolution to said genocidal archmages. Those were off the table and would clash with his magic resistance anyway. Rebel called surprisingly strongly to Nathan. If ever there was a place in need of a revolution, Giant's Rest sounded like that place. But when the authorities had mental magic, staging a rebellion seemed like an exercise in futility. Nathan bounced off another wall. He wasn't gaining much over the golem. He needed something to enhance his speed, and something to strengthen his anti-magic to get through the locks and traps Tial had mentioned. I need something that enhances me physically, and maybe does something about this pain. Both Martial Monk and Anti-Magic Brawler appealed to Nathan, and seemed like ways to immediately improve his chances to escape. Both were equally disadvantaged by missing an arm, but that was a problem for future Nathan, who was not running from golems into magical traps and an unknown wilderness. What made the decision easy in the end was that Anti-Magic Brawler mentioned his anti-magic and Martial Monk didn't. Furthermore, his meditation was a means to an end, not an end to itself. Being a monk was a calling, a purpose in the way being a brawler wasn't, and Nathan didn't like the mention of enlightenment. Ultimately, Nathan didn't want to let Davrar give him a purpose, just a tool to escape this goddamn tower. So, wishing he could have considered the matter more fully and without the pressures of running down a staircase while missing an arm, Nathan chose to be an anti-magic brawler. More boxes and knowledge unfolded before him. Congratulations, you are now an anti-magic brawler and have unlocked 3 class skills. These skills are tied to your parent class, and their power will increase with your level in that class. Davrar applauds your choice and hopes you will continue to survive and prosper. New class skill Stamina. You have unlocked the Stamina resource. Stamina will accumulate during periods of rest and can be spent to improve the speed and strength of your movements, or used for other skills or talents that utilize stamina. New class skill Brawler's Indifference. You will be less likely to flinch and more capable of ignoring pain and wounds to continue fighting. New class skill Anti-Magic Blows. Your blows and strikes will enhance your inherent anti-magic, allowing you to break magical barriers and constructs with bare-handed strikes. You have leveled up to level 15. The pain radiating from the stump of Nathan's arm abated. His running became smoother, his gait more even. The pain wasn't gone, but the intensity was muted and he didn't feel the visceral horror of missing his arm anymore. Brawler's Indifference allowed him to ignore it. The arm wasn't what mattered right now, and being distracted by his stump would get him killed. That's so much better. I hadn't realized how debilitating it was. Next, Nathan used stamina to run faster, which felt as natural as breathing deeply. Instead of skipping 4 of the shallow steps at a time, he was skipping 6, then 7. The stamina inside of him decreased steadily. It wouldn't last forever, but he was already leaving the golem behind. Once he had a healthy lead on the golem and was approaching the bottom of the staircase, Nathan stopped using his stamina, which now sat steady at about 150-250. That felt like hitting the nitro button in a racing game. Amazing. The stairs ended in a grand hall at the bottom of the shaft. the walls tiled with an intricate mosaic showing some dramatic scene that Nathan didn't stop to look at. There were a few doors in the hall, but a large set of double doors large enough to drive a semi through was the obvious winner in the door-to-outside contest. Nathan sprinted over and threw his body weight against them. He bounced off. There wasn't a handle, bar, or obvious locking mechanism. Nathan pivoted his body and slammed his palm into the center of the doors as hard as he could, spending stamina throughout the motion. He felt a layer of magic crack at the blow, and his next shove sent one of the doors flying open. A plaza of stone lay in front of him, and beyond it a road wound through scraggly pine trees. He took off across the plaza, spending stamina again to get away from the tower. Hearing something, Nathan glanced over his shoulder and stumbled. Behind him, flanking the door, were two 20-foot-tall statues of warriors. Well, they had been flanking the door. Now they were charging after Nathan, metal greatswords held ready in stone hands. The swords were nearly 15 feet long and glowed with a red aura. Shit, run faster. Nathan turned his back to them and took off, spending stamina like water and doing his best to emulate Usain Bolt. Pending utility skill, low-tier sprinting. You are running very fast. This skill will help you run quickly in the future. It will not allow you to run in circumstances where you couldn't otherwise. Yes, please. Congratulations, you have accepted the low-tier sprinting utility skill. It will become a part of your status and rank up as you use it. It starts at rank 1 and becomes more effective as it ranks up. Think about how you use your skill to aid in skill development at rank 10. Nathan's chest rose and his toes pushed into the ground. It wasn't an enormous difference, but combined with his stamina, Nathan made it across the plaza and into the trees in seconds. Once he was past the second layer of trees, he didn't hear the golems chasing him anymore. He turned around to see one of them throw a fireball at him. It flew at him with the speed of a baseball pitch, coming straight for his chest. Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't have the time or bracing to dodge, so he brought his hand up in a stamina-assisted slap at the fireball, which exploded away from his palm. The fire blasted out, and Nathan was sent stumbling backwards. He wasn't badly burnt, though it felt like he'd held his hand in a campfire for a bit too long, before somebody pointed a very large hairdryer at his entire body. His robe was on fire, so Nathan darted behind a small mound of earth and dropped to the ground, rolling around to extinguish the flames. Low-tier sprinting rank 2 achieved. He peeked a quick glance over the small lump of earth, looking toward the golems, ready to take off again at any moment. The tree in front of him was aflame, the blowback from the fireball turning it into an instant torch. Damn, that spell should have made me into barbecue. Magic resistance proves its worth yet again. I think anti-magic blows helped me out too. Who says you can't punch a fireball? The giant golems had turned around and were returning to the tower, but Nathan thought getting farther away would be a good idea. He ran further into the forest, careful to avoid a clear line of sight to the golems. He got another 50 feet away and slumped to the ground, checking his injuries. His arm wasn't bleeding and his palm wasn't badly hurt. The hand was definitely burnt, but not into deep tissue. What is it with me and hand wounds? Hail, may I request a word? Nathan's head snapped around and he jumped to his feet, shaking with adrenaline. A woman had come out from behind a tree 40 feet away and was looking straight at him. She was short and wide, with dark brown skin and voluminous tied-back dreadlocks. Her armor was scuffed leather, festooned with pockets, and a warm-looking fur cloak. Her hands were out wide, palms clearly visible and empty. She approached slowly, voice low and calm. Are you okay? What is your name? Can I just have 5 goddamn minutes? I'm not sure I'd be better at handling this, but at least I'd have a minute to assess my situation. Nathan eyed her, ready to run again if the woman made a threatening move. She looked nothing like Teal, but he remained on edge and his voice was tense. Sorry, but I don't want to tell you. What do you know about that? He pointed back toward Tial's tower, hoping her answer would tell him her intentions. He checked his available stamina in case he had to run. Stamina, 36,250, that's not much. She turned her head to look at the tower, a grimace across her broad face. She kept her voice even and calm. It's a research tower of Giant's Rest, just taken over a few weeks ago by a newly raised archmage. We're trying to figure out what his research is and kill him if we get the chance. They're here to kill Tial. Well, that's certainly promising. Nathan relaxed a bit but kept pushing. We. Who is we, and what is your name? And please stop coming closer. If she was telling the truth, he'd stumbled onto enemies of Giant's Rest. But he had a skill to enhance his earnestness, so it was only prudent to assume people could have skills that made them better at lying. And Nathan didn't like the way she was edging closer to him. The woman stopped about 20 feet away, arms still held wide. My name is Valhalla, and I lead an adventuring team out of Gemor. Artha, Emerald, come out. Another figure emerged from the brush to Nathan's right, decked in a darkened breastplate, heavy chainmail, and a sturdy helmet that completely blocked their face, leaving only the mouth exposed. Their visible skin was porcelain white, and a fancifully decorated rapier on one hip was balanced by a heavy cleaver on the other. Valhalla gestured to the figure. This is Emerald. How do they see? Nathan's attention was grabbed by another figure coming up behind Valhalla. It was a centaur, but instead of a horse, the bottom half had a different profile. Thinner legs and bushier fur clued Nathan in. The bottom half was an elk. The top half was a well-muscled man wearing thin clothing with skin the texture and color of gray maple bark. He had long hair and a large beard in a deep silver. Two large, multi-pronged antlers sprouted from his head. He spoke in a deep, smooth voice. And I am Artha. With that voice and body, Nathan would have found him hot if it wasn't for the whole elk thing. Fantasy world. Fantasy world. These seem like good candidates for Tial's barbarians and intelligent monsters, though. I'm in the middle of unfamiliar territory with no supplies, and I know the nearby civilization is hostile to me. I need help and a guide. That thought made him rethink his interaction with these people. He turned back to Valhalla. Thank you. I apologize for my caution. My name is Nathan Lark. I've had a rough few days. I just escaped from that tower. If you could help me, I would really appreciate it. She looked him over again, eyes lingering on the burnt robe and stump of an arm. Hear me, that appears to be true. Seems sure you're not a Giant's agent after that spell, though I'd like to hear how you ate a guardian golem's fireball and came out just a little singed. Stick to my heels. We'll go to our camp and meet William, the last member of my team.